Hey, it's Bill Gross, the LA probate expert, and I interview professionals in finance and the legal world. They're assistants to my clients, real estate investors and families that have trust in estate property. One of my longtime friends, I'm embarrassed to say how long, college colleague as well, and a super professional in the accounting world is David Ellis. And so I asked David to come on today and we have a chat a little bit about what he does, how he can help you. So, hey, David, nice to see you as
Hi,
always.
Bill. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
So we met in college at USC. So where'd you grow up? In California, or where'd you grow up before?
Born and raised Arcadia, Monterey Park, California, that area,
Very nice.
San Gabriel Valley.
San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah.
And what high school you go to?
Went to Alhambra High, the Mighty Moors.
Oh, that's a bunch of. And so we were both at
Yeah,
USC on the debate team,
that's right.
and you had a number of USC debaters from Alhambra High. I remember Rich.
Richard Kirkham.
Richard Kirkham was from
Right.
Alhambra. A couple other guys. Yeah, a
Yeah.
bunch of criminals from Alhambra for sure.
That's right. We were.
So you and I went undergraduate at USC together. And then what did you do after undergraduate at USC?
Well, believe it or not, my father had a CPA firm at the time, and I joined the firm and got my CPA license, got the experience, and worked with him for about 25 years until he hit the age of 80, and he went blind in one eye, and he decided he would hang it up. So I tried to convince him to stay. I thought we'd have a unique marketing perspective. We could legitimately advertise that we're the only CPA in town that can literally turn a blind eye to your tax peccadillos.
No.
I'm kidding. But anyway, it was too much for him with just one eye. So he retired at the age of 80, and he just turned 95. So I bought him out 15 years ago.
Great. So the firm is Ellis and Ellis CPAs, but these days the Ellis is you, and the other and Ellis is the, I guess, what's the term they use for it when you're when you were the emeritus? He is the Ellis emeritus, I guess.
Yeah. So, and he still gets lunch every Thursday, and I deliver every week. Every Thursday, I deliver lunch and his profit check.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
I can sign for that job. That sounds like a great job. So, obviously, accountants and then the next level up, CPAs, many people don't understand there's a distinction that can be really important. So for those people who just have a tax preparer or maybe see the title and wonder what it means, what's the distinction of a certified public accountant versus a tax preparer or an accountant?
Well, yeah, it's kind of a hodgepodge industry. Accountant is a very nebulous term, and there's really no definition for it under state law. But basically, what you have is, going from your least level of expertise up in general. You have people with the California tax preparer's license, and they passed an exam administered by the state of California. Then the next level up is you have what's called enrolled agents, and those are people who either worked for IRS prior to getting a license, or they passed a pretty rigorous 3-day exam that IRS issues just on taxes. And, they are, experts in taxation. I was actually an enrolled agent before I was a CPA. So that is a regulated industry by IRS standards. And, many enrolled agents are extremely competent. And then probably the next level up would be your CPAs and tax attorneys. And we are licensed by the state of California, and CPAs obviously have to have a 4-year degree in accounting, pass the CPA exam, have a certain level of experience, et cetera. And then attorneys, of course, have to be licensed by the state of California and pass the bar exam.
So a CPA would be for sure required for companies to have certain types of financial statements. They get filed with certain types of entities. But why might somebody who's just getting financial work done, why might they prefer a CPA versus an accountant or whatever else that means?
It's a matter of the level of experience and expertise.
Right.
It depends on the nature of the problem. Again, the term accountant spans anywhere from somebody who does a little bookkeeping on Excel all the way up the ladder, depending upon how you want to define yourself. I think what you're getting with the CPA is you're getting somebody that has a level of expertise
Yeah.
and is regulated by the State Board of Accountancy. We are
Yeah.
heavily regulated. We're
Yeah.
required to have 60 hours of continuing education. 80 hours of continuing education every 2 years, and it's like being an attorney. We're just a regulated industry with a certain level of education and expertise.
I think it's like in real estate. I practice. I'm a broker associated with a firm. I only need to be an agent. I have the extra license of a broker, more for my own education, and to have, because I have a higher level of experience. It may not be needed license-wise for my client, but a prospective client will know, I have more experience than the average agent. So it's probably the same thing. I deal primarily in probate and litigation cases, and I know that you work in it as well, though you kind of work in some of the areas I avoid. So, for example, one of your specialties is divorce. Talk
Correct.
about some of the special accounting issues that come up in divorce cases.
Well, on the divorce side, you have forensic accounting, which basically revolves around determining if they're missing assets, what somebody's hidden income might be, and then spousal disputes and things like that. I don't do so much forensic accounting. I'm more on the tax end of it. I specialize in the tax planning and compliance because there are a lot of just unique things about the tax situation when a person gets divorced. Just to give you a quick example, most people in tax accounting know that when you transfer assets in divorce, generally you don't recognize any gain or loss on those transfers. It's a tax-free transaction under most circumstances, but there's some exceptions. And one of those exceptions is if one spouse transfers assets to a trust for the benefit of the other spouse, if there's any gain or loss to be recognized on that transaction, you can have a major taxable event. Another might be if you transfer an installment sale to a trust for benefit of another spouse. Installment sales, say you sell $1 million piece of property and you're receiving 10% over 10 years, you'd be picking up $100,000 a year, and whatever gain was built into that installment, you would pick it up gradually over 10 years. Well, if you transfer that to a trust, to a spouse in divorce, all the gain is automatically recognized. So that can come as a very nasty surprise. What's even worse is when you transfer to an installment obligation to a trust or an asset where the liabilities exceed the basis. That means basically, to give you a quick example, let's say I had a piece of property that I bought for $10,000 and I mortgaged it for $100,000. Okay, if I transfer, so my liabilities exceed my basis in the asset. Basis is just a fancy tax term that accountants use for saying that's my tax investment in the property. Anyway, if I have something with a basis of $10,000 and I have a liability on it of $100,000, if I transfer it to a trust for benefit of my wife in divorce, the difference, the $90,000 gain, it's automatically recognized as taxable income. What's even worse, it's recognized as taxable income to me, the person doing the transfer. So now I'm losing the asset and I've got to pay the tax on it. And my spouse, through her trust, gets the benefit of the asset, gets a step up in basis for it for her tax purposes. It's now worth $100,000. So she could turn around and sell it the next day for $100,000 and she won't pay any tax. So you've got these situations where you're transferring assets in trust and divorce, where the person making the transfer has to part with all their money and has to pay tax for parting with their money, and the ex-spouse gets all the tax benefit.
Wow.
It's the absolute worst of both worlds. And if you don't know that, you can easily trip into it.
Right. And if you know that and want to make it the transfer that way strategically, you both agree to it is one thing. But what you're talking about is people discover this, and usually they don't discover it until after the transfer has been made and the tax liability is now created or it's time to file. And they discover this liability of 10, 20, 30, 50,000 or more. In Southern California, we have houses that people bought for 150, 200. They sell for $1 million now. It's an $800,000 potentially taxable gain, and the difference between paying taxes on it or not certainly exceeds the CPA's fee by several times over, right? And that's where getting expertise is so valuable in these areas. I think I've never, personally, never, I've always underappreciated the importance of it, and now starting to appreciate it more. And as I look back, I see that. So divorces, I can see as a real sticky wicket. And I know you also do a lot of work in trusts and estates. So tell me about what kind of work you do there, and what are some of the common alligators that people miss in that area?
Well, generally, we do the preparation of the trust tax returns, the 1041s, when a person's passed away. What happens when a taxpayer dies, that their taxable entity immediately ends on the date of death, and after the date of death, the estate becomes the taxable entity, and they're different. Although the trust and estate rules are somewhat similar. They do vary somewhat, but you have to file a split year between the person's personal income tax and the trust income tax. And I'll just tell you one thing we see all the time that prior tax preparers don't do. I work for a lot of fiduciaries, a lot of professional fiduciaries, court-appointed fiduciaries. And, a lot of times they'll bring me a couple of years worth of trust or estate returns that are, in a mess, and, we'll try to correct those. But probably the single biggest thing I see there, that mistake that tax preparers make, is they fail to step up the basis of the assets at the death of the person. And basically what that means, just to give you a quick example, I'll use my own parents, okay? They bought their house in Monterey Park, California in 1969, and they paid about $30,000 for it, okay?
Classic case. Southern California is classic.
Beautiful house. It's Cinderella architecture, if that rings a bell, with lots of little steeples and things like that. It's a beautiful piece of property. It's a pool house, and it's just gorgeous. Anyway, just to pick a round number, right now it's worth maybe $1 million. Okay,
but we're not talking a mansion here. We're talking about a nice single-family home in a nice suburban area.
It's maybe a 1,600 square foot house in a nice area.
Yeah.
So anyway. Let's just say, God forbid, they both drop dead tomorrow. Okay. The house, for tax purposes, would achieve what's called a step up in basis, which means for tax purposes, income tax purposes, not property tax, it would be worth $1 million. So myself, as their only son, would inherit it at a tax basis of $1 million, which means I could turn around and sell it before the grass is even grown over on their graves, and I would pocket $1 million, and I wouldn't pay a penny in state or federal income tax. This is a step up in basis rule under Section 1015. There was some talk of amending this or changing this under the Build Back Better Act in Congress. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. No. So anyway, to take that a little further, that's one thing that's frequently missed. And if you forget to step up the basis and the estate sells the property, you wind up paying all this tax you don't otherwise have to pay. The other thing about the step up in basis is if you have business property, you step up the basis at the date of death, and that starts your depreciation deductions all over again.
Wow.
So say my parents were renting this house because they'd gone to the old folks home, okay, and they were renting their house. Their basis for depreciation would be $30,000. The depreciation deductions would be very low. Okay, when they both pass away, the basis for depreciation is now $1 million. So the depreciation deductions are very large, and that shelters a lot of income. And what we see sometimes is when people forget to do this over a number of years, they changed the tax law back in, I think it was 2006, where it used to be, if you missed your depreciation deductions, you couldn't go back and catch them up more than 3 years. Okay. Now, if you missed your big depreciation deductions, you can go back as far back as you missed them, maybe as far back as 30 years, and you can catch them up. And we had one woman who died, or she didn't die, her husband died. The basis in the property was never stepped up, and it was millions of dollars worth of property in West LA. They came to LA in 1950, and they just started buying everything they could see, like Monopoly. They bought everything they can get their hands on. So she had this property worth millions of dollars. The basis had never been stepped up. We took it, we cleaned it all up, we figured out what the back depreciation deductions were, and she had about $3 million of back depreciation deductions that we were able to deduct in the current
Wow.
year,
Wow.
wipe out all our income tax,
Wow.
and then what we weren't able to use in the current year, we carried back 3 years, got our refunds, and what was
Wow.
left over, we carried forward for about another 5 years. So
Wow.
she literally got millions of dollars worth of tax refunds and savings by
Wow.
knowing this little trick about stepping up the basis in property at the death of the first spouse. If I could add one other thing that's very important on this, by the way, in California, in order to get 100% step up in basis, you have to hold the property in community property. Can't be joint tenancy. So if you're married
Ah.
and you're holding your property in joint tenancy, you may be laying a real tax trap for yourself.
Wow, that's a big point. I deal with people take investing in properties all the time. Though I do recommend them to get some sort of a trust to put the property and take title that way for most people. But that's interesting. Joint tenants will not get the full step up in community
They
property
get
law.
they get half. They get 50% step up in basis.
Yeah, but you're talking about the different. I mean, if they do that because they don't know and just pick randomly one or the other, you're talking about possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax
Oh
liability
yeah.
over 10, 20, 30 years.
Oh,
So
easily or more. Depends on the size of the property. The other thing, the reason people didn't like, or one of the reasons people just automatically did joint tenancy, it was kind of like the default position is, as you know, when one joint tenant dies, you don't have to probate it. It goes automatically over to the surviving joint tenant. And that was one advantage that we had over community property if you didn't want to use a trust. Now we have community property in California with rights of survivorship, so it
right,
kind of gets you around the problem of having to
right,
probate it. But it is
right,
definitely something you need a tax advisor as well as a competent attorney to
right.
kind of guide you through that.
Definitely, definitely. Well, good. Okay, so we talked about divorce. We talked about trusts, and I think the thing to think about is some of these major financial issues. The difference in fees become insignificant to the amount of money that expertise is going to save you. Tell me about working with fiduciaries. What is that like? How is that different than working with an individual party or family or those kinds of or entity? How's that different, or is it different?
Well, I like to work with fiduciaries, and just to give you an example of a fiduciary in the news, everybody heard about Britney Spears, right? Her affairs were being handled by professional fiduciaries. I think they had one fiduciary for her personal side and the other side for the financial side. She was not my client; that had nothing to do with it. But in general, I like working with people like that because you're dealing with professionals who are used to it.
Yeah,
They have offices, they have staff, they know the drill. It goes much smoother. It's difficult sometimes dealing with a individual person. Let's say mom dies, and oldest daughter is the fiduciary, and she's never had any experience with filing trust or estate tax returns or doing
yeah,
all the things you need to do when somebody dies and probate and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, lots of people do it. As you I'm sure know, it's a major obligation if you agree to be a fiduciary for somebody or a trustee.
right.
It's a lot of work, and there's a lot of liability there too. Because if the taxes are messed up, guess who IRS can go after if the trust is bankrupt? They
Right,
can go after the trustee. There's personal liability.
right.
But in general, I prefer to work with professional fiduciaries if possible. But we work with a lot of people who are not as well.
Yeah, and I've seen many times in court-appointed fiduciaries where it sounds great to get the business up front, and they don't realize sometimes that these cases can drag on and on and on, and after the assets are gone and the buildings are smaller, and the court has to approve you to get off of it. So it is a
Right.
big responsibility. I happen to have a friend and colleague who, in addition to being a real estate broker and an accountant, a CPA by license, is a professional fiduciary, and so she manages multiple pieces of that. And I always feel like, wow, it's on one hand, great to do multiple pieces. On the flip side, there's multiple pieces of liability that you're facing if you
Right.
make a mistake. And so,
Right. A
um,
lot of, I believe CPAs and attorneys and people who have the professional fiduciary license can automatically be professional fiduciaries. It's not something that, I admire them. It's a tough job and they serve a great purpose. It's not something that I would want to do. I
yeah.
tend to focus in just these, very narrow areas because they're complex enough, in and of themselves.
Now you must have clients. You're given I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I know I get asked all the time about potential changes in laws that affect my business, and that includes tax laws. So when people come to you and say, tax rates next year, or how do I plan for next year or 5 years? Do you see the marginal rates going up still? Do you see still these processes that can help shelter or reduce taxes? What do you advise clients who are trying to analyze the likelihood of the tax rates changing in the next period of time, or do you even go there?
Well, you never know what Congress is going to do. Even during the time they've been debating the current tax legislation, it's gone up, it's gone down, it's gone sideways. So you kind of make these predictions at your own peril. And for liability reasons, I can tell people, well, this is what's being discussed, and this is what the law is now. You're going to have to make your own decision as to whether or not you think that this bill is going to pass and the law is going to change. It's today. All we know for sure is what the law is today, and
Yes.
hopefully it won't get changed retroactively. Then you start to get into some constitutional issues.
Yes.
But generally, although there have been exceptions, they don't retroactively change the law. Generally, they'll start, for this for years beginning January 1st,
Right.
whatever. So what we try to do is we tell them, this is what they're talking about. This is what the law is. And, the client pretty much has to make his decision on what he wants to do.
It's funny you say that. The 1 year I had a structure of a business where I was able to hold money into a business for, as we were building it, 3 or 4 years. And in 1996, at the end of the year, I took a huge distribution, which really represented about 3 years of profits. And that was the year that Bill Clinton was elected. They had a tax increase that was retroactive for 1996. And so I got that 1 year distribution, which really to me was like 3 years income, all got taxed in that 1 year at the higher rate with a retroactive piece. And so, yeah, you got to pay attention to these things. But like you say, you can't predict them. So you just do the best you can with the information you have and try to not outguess the Congress, I guess.
Yep, it's tough. But I mean, if I had to make a guess, I would say for people making over $400,000, taxes are probably going to wind up going up on ordinary income. Who knows what's going to happen with capital gains? There might be a little bit of an increase there. I have had clients that don't want to take the chance. So you know what? If I sell it today, I know what the tax rate is, and I don't have to take a chance on it going up.
Right.
I doubt seriously taxes are going to go down anytime soon.
I would agree with you. I increasingly, of course, I'm in real estate. I see people all the time moving to lower tax states, Nevada, Florida,
Oh, sure.
Puerto Rico. The company I'm involved with, there's a lot of people with stock options that move to Puerto Rico to get the Puerto Rico rate rather than a federal rate. There's no state rate in Puerto Rico. Do you see that happening? And is that something you advise clients as far as a strategy for a year or two changing their locations?
I see it happening, particularly with my wealthy clients. One of my wealthiest clients moved to Arizona not long ago, although there is still state income tax in Arizona. It's less, I think it's about 6 point something percent as opposed to ours can be upwards of 13% for people in these, with this income. I see them going to Florida. Texas is another one, very wealthy woman inherited a substantial amount of money from her mom and moved to Texas where there's no state income tax. And for $1 million, you get more than a 1,700 square foot house in Texas.
It's amazing. It's amazing the change.
Although funny enough, they got caught in the big freeze last year.
Right.
And it wasn't so much fun then.
Right. All these places are great until you live there, and then you realize we have such good weather. It's freezing here in LA today. It's 57 degrees.
Yeah, freezing at 57. Yeah.
And people around the country in these other places, which I lived in Florida for 2 years. I loved it. May move back, but it's not as nice as living here. The temperature and the sunshine and we have so many advantages that people are still going to be here.
Well, so, yeah. I was going to say I'm okay with the earthquakes, but I have some requirements: no alligators, no tornadoes, no hurricanes, no sinkholes. Yeah. So that for me, that lets out a lot of some of these places that people are fleeing to.
I lived in Florida for 2 years, and we literally in our backyard there was like a little channel and then a golf course across. Yeah. The channel was maybe 5-8 feet across. But alligators lived in the channel. We saw them all the time in the back. I mean, they were literally within 20 feet of my backyard.
No. That doesn't work for me. Well, there was a video one going around the internet not long ago. This alligator on a Florida golf course was probably about the size of a Buick. And it it was just ambling along.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
no, count me out. I'm staying right here.
Okay, good. Well, look, you and I both been here for a long time since I knew you since 1980. So we've both been around here for,
Yeah.
wow, 42 years I've known you.
I'm
It's been
not
a
even
long.
that old. How could that be?
I don't know. It's a math problem. Somebody, if you figure that out, put in the chat box how that worked out to be.
Yeah.
But I've known you that long. The whole time I've known you, you've been successful, hardworking, and it's exciting to see you on top of your game in the accounting business and,
Oh, thank
and doing
you.
these complicated issues. So we're just
Well,
chatting a bit
same
about.
back to you, by the way.
Thank you. So we're just chatting a little bit about clients I have that are in divorce situations and trust, estates, some of these more complicated cases, fiduciaries. Definitely appreciate having you around as an asset and having you in my Rolodex. So David, thank you so much for your time today. Now, if someone wanted to reach you and ask questions, if they're appropriate for your type of business, I know it's Ellis and Ellis CPAs. How would be the best way to reach you?
We have a website, www.ellisandelliscpas.com. That's Ellis and Ellis. Or you can just Google David Ellis CPA Pasadena. I'm all over the place.
Fantastic. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Ellis and Ellis CPAs with an S at the end.com is the website. And David Ellis, if you Google him and find a good looking guy, you know got the right guy in Pasadena for your accounting needs. So David, thank you again. It was great chatting with you here today on the Zoom call. Look forward to seeing you in person when we're able to get together.
Thanks, Bill. Good seeing you. Take care.